How are you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Hey guys, we're going to talk today about dealing with corruption at the highest level of a correctional facility. It was an idea that Connie thought of right before we decided to do today's show. We actually had another topic, but she came up with a better topic. And I think this is a great topic because as I'm Googling it, it seems to be that this is an ongoing issue. We are seeing wardens being escorted out for doing foolish things. So the question today is, how does that affect the facility, the employee morale? You know, the people that are left in the stead kind of wondering like, whoa, who we have as a leader now? So I think it's a great dialogue. I think we're going to kind of just figure out as it goes, like we always do. I just want to tell you guys that the show is sponsored by 3 entities. We have American Military University. If you guys get a chance, if you haven't checked it out, please check out American Military University. It's a great online school, very supportive of what we do in corrections, supportive of what we do here on Tier Talk. So please, guys, check it out. We also have Guardian RFID, from inmate tracking and cell checks to cloud-based businesses and artificial intelligence. Guardian RFID digitally transforms jails, prisons, and juvenile detention facilities of every size. Visit guardianrfid.com for more information. If you guys check out Guardian RFID, also has a YouTube channel, so check it out. We do produce content on their YouTube channel. You'll find myself there, Russ, with William Young. I mean, the list goes on. I also have one more sponsor. Sorry, guys, I had a brain fart, if you will. Tier Talk is also sponsored by Shea, and that's CEIA, Shea USA. Shea USA is the world's leading weapon, cell phone, and contraband detection system manufacturer for corrections. For more information, contact Joe Vasquez at 440-561-7615. He's a subject matter expert. He's passionate about our industry, and he will take good care of you. Guys, Inmate Manipulation Decoder is also available. It's on Amazon. Link to that is in the description. And working on my Correctional Daily Reader day by day. That should be out sometime next year. Now, with all that said, and there she is, the beauty of Tier Talk. What's up, Con? Are you eating?
Oh my gosh! I put a piece of gum in my mouth. Now I'm gonna get rid of it.
Oh, that was bad timing on mine.
I know. I was like, oh, he's got 2 more to go.
That's a bubble gum piece. That's a Bubba Hubba.
Yeah.
Hubba Bubba. What was it called? Bubba Hubba? Or Hubba Bubba? Hubba Bubba?
Hubba Bubba.
No. Hey, Connie. So real quick, do you mind first off introducing yourself to our audience again?
Of course. Hi, everybody. Connie Alleyne here. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm also the podcast host of The Fly Behind the Wall and the author of The Cage with Sir Cocoon. And you know what? Things have just been kind of growing and evolving, and it's been a great time being able to serve. I just had the humbling experience of doing a talk with some young scholars. And, you know, there's so many questions that young people have about the profession, right? And I think one thing it made me think about was, how do we connect with the young people who would be interested in going into corrections, but they're just not sure how to go about it. And I think there's enough misinformation out there. So how do we make sure they get the right information so that they're making good decisions? Because I feel like we've got to be doing something to replenish our workforce pool, right? As we're seeing, you know, people retired and all this good stuff. So that was just a thought. It just came to me while I was talking about it, because I know different facilities have different recruitment efforts, and it looks different every place. But, you know, these young people are preparing to graduate and looking for a space in law enforcement and just not sure. And so when they saw that I worked in corrections, it was like, you're not an officer. I was like, no, I'm not an officer. But the fact that there's like they didn't know there were other roles in corrections than being an officer. And I think it was just good to be able to shed some light on all the other good stuff that happens in the facilities.
That's why a channel like this exists. You know, it shows our evolution. Now, guys, you know what's funny is before we were going to do this show, actually, we were going to do a good show on moving up too soon. Right now, we are going through hiring concerns, and you could be a senior staff with just 2 or 3 years on the job, maybe even less. So we were going to cross into that dialogue. So we'll probably do that again. But in the meantime, I really do think dealing with corruption at the highest level of the facility is a good topic, only because, as I said, we were Googling it, and it's just happening now lately. Connie, I mean, this is your suggestion. What brought this idea to your mind?
So I was scrolling through like corrections in the news, and there seems to be just this reoccurring theme of sort of leadership getting caught up in different situations. And I only say it, very vaguely, because we don't know what's true, what's not true. We don't know the details, and it's not for us to weigh in, right? We're not going to Monday morning quarterback on anybody's situation, especially because we don't know the details. But, what it did make me think about is, so what happens in facilities when the leadership is caught up, right? What happens to the staff? How do we regroup and get back to the business at hand? How do we make sure that staff stay engaged and that they're, still feeling that the work they're doing is meaningful? Because if your leader is corrupt, or there's that suspicion of a corrupt leader, I would imagine that could be very disheartening to many staff. That's like, they're holding us to this high standard. Meanwhile, they're doing X, Y, or Z. But I just thought it would be a good conversation to have, because I think all too often, it's kind of the thing we don't want to talk about because it happened to a leader. Is it, are you putting your career at risk by having an opinion about a leader or leaders who kind of get caught up? But, it's part of our world, and I think we should talk about it.
For some staff, they can even see it as vindication.
Oh,
it's true. It's
vindication.
True. Now, obviously, if your leader is being seen escorted out in handcuffs, there is going to be a culture shock, because, again, the leader sets the culture. So I think there's a lot of things you have to be concerned of right off the bat. Is when you have someone corrupt at the highest of levels, then it's hard for them to maintain honesty at the lowest of levels. So I think when that happens, when you start seeing the top be affected with corruption, then you're looking at a facility that is going to have to go through a whole culture change. I mean, it's just going to be automatic. Also, I mean, you could even do that if you have corruption at the agencies level. So above the facility, at the agencies level, more of a centralized corruption. The problem is that when you have the power to influence so many people, that's the power to influence a culture that may have to, at that point, change. So I know that the first thing I look at, if I see something that's negative about the culture of a facility, is the first thing I look at are the people that are responsible for that culture. That's why even in the business world, when you have a concern with, let's say, a business, the culture of a business, the first thing that people usually do is fire the CEO. Because right off the bat, whether it's the CEO's fault or not, they allowed it. They allowed it. So you reinvent the culture. So right off the bat, Connie, and I'm sure you would agree, this isn't just about, okay, we have a corrupt leader, we remove the corrupt leader and everything's going to be okay. It could be a culture thing, knowing that, hey, we have to look at everything here, because the person at the top creates the culture, creates what's permissible. Correct?
For sure. So it's almost like corruption at the highest level kind of gives us all permission to do things we shouldn't be doing, right? Because that person cannot operate in isolation, right? Simply because the person at the top should be so far removed from the population that they must have engaged other people to be a part of whatever it is that's going on, right? So, I just can't imagine that you have leadership. Like, I'll just use myself. Like, if all of a sudden, my warden wanted to have a significant presence in medical, It's one thing if there is a concern, right? Like he says or she says, hey, Connie, you know, we're going to keep an eye on this thing, whatever that thing is, right? I mean, it could be me, so maybe there's no conversation, right? They don't want me to know, but thankfully I've been in a trusted space that when we were investigating something, you know, I was kind of in the loop of that. But I think in an instant where someone just seems out of place, right? It's not normal for someone at such a high level to be so close to the population. You know, it kind of raises eyebrows. And so to avoid raising those eyebrows or to avoid the routine of things looking normal, right? Like, I feel like there has to be some engagement of others, which also means now other people know that someone is doing something they shouldn't be doing. And they may even have to involve other people to continue with whatever that thing is. So, you know, I think, you know, when it happens, you know, you cut off the head and then what, right?
Well, it's the domino effect because you're right. I mean, you know, a person at that high level, being that they're a little bit more, they're not as immediate to the front line, you know, or
Right.
to the inmates or whatever it is. So they're always going to be someone in the middle. And then the sad thing is the people in the middle usually feel that they're protected by this high level of authority until someone literally starts to question the power within that position.
Or they feel obligated, right? Like,
Yeah.
even if they might feel protected, they've now been pulled into this space of almost obligation. And I think it takes a really strong person who can, like, say no, one, because you think, if I don't do this thing, like, what does this mean for me and my career? But I also think it puts you in a position to really be able. So one, you have to really know what you're talking about if you're going to sort of resist whatever that is, right?
Well, that goes exactly with understanding the power of the position above you. But it's still like, I like what you're saying though, because, you know, understand the power of that position, but still challenging that position is hard. But if you're going to make the effort to understand what power can and can't do, then I'm assuming you're on the trajectory to say, well, you know, something's not right here.
Yeah, something's off.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to do something. But yeah, I like that. And then you also mentioned the obligation part.
Yeah, I think the obligation is like, it's like your boss comes to ask you to do something. It's hard to be like, I'm not doing that, right? But I also think in this paramilitary structure, right? If you were given a direction or you were given, like, this is our mission, right? I think it would be very difficult to question the leader who's now given you sort of your marching orders. And so that obligation to fulfill, to achieve the mission sort of exists. And, you know, for me, I kind of think, how do you resist? How do you say no? How do you, I mean, I think, yes, we can be tactical, practical, try to come up with all the right words. But I think in the moment, that obligation to the person above me in the chain of command, and then forget about if that is the highest person in your facility in that chain who's given you sort of a direct order. It's not, I think it's easier said than done that you're going to, like, just not do it.
Yeah, it's weird because it's hard to find the balance, because if you're new and you don't know enough, then you may fall under the protection of that person in the higher position, which means I'm going to do this because I know that this higher position is going to protect me because they said they would. But then also, if you know the person too well, you may know it's something you shouldn't be doing, but we got a rapport. We're buddies, you know, and at this point here, you can trust me to carry those type of assignments out. So I really do think it takes someone who knows enough about the position, but also knows enough about core values. You know, like basically what you're asking breaks away from the vision or breaks away from what I believe is what we're supposed to be doing in this profession. So again, it's not an easy thing to do, and that's why you could see how a facility's culture could be affected by someone at the highest level being corrupted. Because again, I mean, to me, this is a lot harder than going to your peer and correcting some level of action. This is more of at the highest level where some people could be far removed from even trying to address it. All they could do is drop notes. But again, this person has influence over some of the people you may go to report it to, following that chain of command. So I think here, right off the bat, we did explain right off the bat how and why someone at the highest level, if they get corrupted, how it could easily affect the culture of a facility in regards to people just having the courage to step up and say, yo, this doesn't feel right. So I think that's definitely one concern right off the bat. That's why it's very important that when we put people in these positions, they are trusted. That's why these high-level positions, they should be appointed to some extent. But it's not about who you know. It's about who's right for the position. So granted, it's appointed so we can have some discretion in filtering for the right reasons. Not because it's appointed because I know Connie and I want Connie in the position. No, it's more of it's appointed because these are the areas that you have to meet that go beyond taking a test. Maybe the test can get you to a certain point if that's required. But having said that, well, because you did good on the test doesn't mean you're going to meet these other areas that we need to filter for. So if the appointment is done correctly, it's done because we want to filter out what we feel is best for what we need for the agency, not what I feel is best personally for what I need to do with my friends. What's your thoughts on that too, Connie, the position of trust?
Yeah, I think that's a major aspect of it, right? Like, so when you are appointed, I think you're held at a higher standard, right? Like there's an expectation that the agency is trusting you to operate from a place of integrity and to carry out the responsibilities prescribed in your title, right? But I think what also comes along with that is that there is a trust that you are going to sort of be a good steward of your resources. And that includes the human capital, right? Like you aren't going to jeopardize your brothers and sisters. Like I feel like it's just an expectation. Now, I've never taken such oath, so I'm not really sure of all the words that are used when someone is sworn in, right? But like, I would imagine that if you are being appointed at such a level, there is an expectation of trust. And I think when that high level person gets caught up, the trust on all levels gets broken, right? Like, because I mean, not for nothing, when I was on the front line and something like that happened, there was a question of who can you trust, right? And so now you're operating from a space of not only can I not trust the inmates, but I can't trust the leadership either, right? And so how do you function effectively in that state of, I don't know, hypervigilance, like whatever you want to call it, but like broken trust in a facility makes it very difficult, I think, for folks to operate from a space of excellence, right? You're not doing your very best at that point in time. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, right. And when you're at the highest level and you do something foolish, you'll see that whatever's directly over you, whether it's the agency or if the agency is a concern, the governor's office, whatever it is, wherever you work for, there's going to be an immediate need to address everything immediately to regain the trust back in that system itself, not in the person. Especially right at the highest level. Like if someone at the front line does something foolish, I mean, yeah, you could stereotype it towards the negative, and I hate when people do that. Like this one person represents all of the correctional officers or all the medical staff. I get it, that's bullshit, but that one person that does something foolish, they're not really in a position to have affected the whole culture, even though some people will look at that as part of a culture that's already established. But that doesn't mean that they're responsible for that culture. It's just an accepted culture. So now when you get the person at the highest level, the person that creates the culture, now it goes into, this is why the officers do foolish stuff. Because ultimately, when the highest level get caught up, it does go downhill to the point where, people are looking to negatively stereotype the staff that work corrections anyway. So this gives them more of leverage to do that. So now what happens here is, because again, if you have someone that's corrupt at top, you're going to assume that they allow corruption at the bottom. And again, because it's leverage here. Like, if I'm doing something foolish, it's probably because, as you said, maybe I allow them to do stuff foolish. So therefore, they can't, I can't go after them, because if I do, then they can come after me. So you have this relationship that's really about leverage. It's about, you not reporting me and me not reporting you. So with that said, in order to rebuild that trust at that highest level, you have to chop it off, because again, it's already like, anytime something bad that's happened at the front line, the first thing you do is you look at leadership. You hold leadership responsible. They're accountable and they have to act. What are you going to do? And it's like, well, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and we're going to make sure we alleviate liability. If it's retraining, if it's removing people, if it's constructive, and we're looking to educate, whatever it is. But now when it's the highest level, what do? You give a rebirth. You take the person out, and then you go back and reevaluate the culture and rebuild it under someone that you can extremely trust, that can build the confidence back in that position. So again, this is not just someone's out and we can replace them. This is like, okay, we lost this person. Who can we put in now that can establish credibility, that they can trust the operations of this facility? So that in itself is a challenge too. Correct, Connie?
Absolutely. Because, we all have a healthy level of skepticism. So regardless of who administration may think is trustworthy, so granted, whoever that person is, their reputation probably precedes them, right? Because when you have these kind of situations, administration is typically looking for the best of the best, because they know there has to be a dramatic change that is going to come. There has to be a dramatic difference between the person they're bringing in and that person who was walked out. So as I'm thinking about it, all I'm thinking is the person that comes in has it definitely will be an uphill battle for that person to regain the trust, for the folks who are already there, who've been through X amount of leadership already, who are already kind of like, whatever, like this may be more of the same. Like there's work to be done.
Can I add something on that real quick?
Mm-hmm.
What you said is spot on. I think at that point, part of the rebuilding is to create the momentum, because there's going to be direct oversight and micromanaging. And the reason why that's done is, even if Connie's competent and we trust her, the point is that we don't want to take that risk. We know we have to rebuild something with the public. So we're going to set our mission, and we're going to micromanage the shit out of Connie until we know that but it's true, until we've created the momentum for her to go on her own. But it's really not so much about the momentum. It's more about getting the okay from the public and the lawmakers saying, okay, she's done enough, let her go. But but Connie, I think what you said is spot on. In an effort to earn the trust, while you're doing that, they're not just going to take a risk. They're going to micromanage the hell out of it.
Absolutely. And I think whoever kind of gets tapped to be that person, they've got to go in with no blinders on, right? Like they're probably going to have to make some really tough decisions straight out the gate, right? Like they're going to have to, if they're like, and I hate to say that, but like, usually they're going to walk in to the rumors, right? Like people who know that this person was connected with the situation that went out the door. And like, there's all that stuff that the person coming in is going to have to navigate. And so for a while before they build trust, they're going to be looked at as the bad guy, right? But like they have to make some tough decisions, not because they're just trying to make a name for themselves, but if they are trying to really clean up a mess that has been made, like those decisions would, like, they have no choice.
Right. And then also to add on top of that too, is that the people that were directly under her, they may not be in the best position to help clean it up either, because one, we don't know what they've been involved in at this point under her influence. That's one thing. And do we trust them? You know, I mean, that's the other concern. I mean, do we trust them to go ahead and be part of that team? That's why they also, what they also may tend to do is lift them up to a point where their direct reports. So let me explain it this way, because this is where it gets a little bit complicated. But basically, is if you have concern with all this leadership, what they'll wind up doing is they'll lift their direct reports to eliminate unnecessary middle ground just until we clean things up. So you could have this facility, instead of reporting through the normal chain of command, which could be, let's say, through a director, through a commissioner, a bunch of stuff, they elevate it up so they can ignore any type of conflicts that could have been present. Because don't forget, guys, I mean, when you have a corrupt leader, the problem is, well, who put this person in the position? I mean, so that person could have went through an interview process, could be connected to, someone at the higher level. What are the things that they've ignored? I mean, this is, is this administrator or is this warden the end all? Maybe, maybe not, because they also report to somebody else. So while we're going through this, in order to alleviate any levels of conflict, how high can we lift up this direct report? I mean, I may not want them reporting to who they directly reported to, because there could be conflict there at this point. So can we go up 2 or 3 more levels? Could it go up to a point where we eliminate the conflict from below and just kind of really focus on whatever direct communication between, let's say, that facility to the highest level possible, so we can investigate everything below it? Guys, that's one of the concerns when you have corruption at the highest level. When you have corruption at the highest level, everything below it is affected and could be seen as a conflict. So you have to lift it up as high as possible so you can address everything below it. So again, you have a warden that's a problem. I get it. But who does she connect herself to? The people above and the people below. So we have to move it up some more and then look at everything underneath. Would you agree with that, Connie? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it makes sense. They usually say at least 2 layers above and 2 layers below. You have to explore to ensure that you've gotten as close to the situation as you can.
Did I explain that correctly, though? Like, can you explain that, the 2 layers? Because that's what I was trying to get at, is that you have to lift it. You have to lift the house up. And I'm hoping people understand what I'm saying, which I'm sure they do. But I like what you just said. 2 layers above, 2 layers below. Can you explain the lifting up the house, the direct report, lifting it up?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, all organizational structures, we've seen it through various states. There's different layers of management and leadership and such. But in order for the messaging and for the affected areas to actually truly be explored and, I guess, well vetted, scrutinized, whatever word you want to use, you have to be able to dig a little deeper. Like, it's not just that leadership, that one leadership person in leadership. It is, so what were their direct levels of influence, right? So directly below them and directly above, right? But some influence has that ripple effect. And so they may even be able to influence another level down and another level above. And to ensure that you've kind of truly gotten to the root of whatever the challenge is or the trouble is in the system, you've got to be able to dig through those levels to ensure that the messaging and whatever the I guess I don't want to, so whatever the treatment is, right? Like you take medication, right? Or you're using ointment, right? You just think of it that way. There's layers of the skin, right? In order for you to actually get to the infection, right? Like sometimes you have to get a syringe, right? It's they put it in your blood. Sometimes you have it can be cured with like some lotion, some ointment, right? So in my mind, I think of it as if we just touch this top surface, whatever's under there is still gonna fester. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so in these instances where we have this stuff that's going on in facilities, the top surface is not enough, right? Because there are layers to many of these issues that have to be addressed. And the only way we can do that is if we really start to dig into what's going on. And typically it's the top two, the layers two above and the layers two below. And is there some other way like I could sort of make that live? I've been thinking about it as I'm talking, but I think hopefully that does it some justice.
Well, I have a way to kind of explain it too. So if there's a corrupt officer or a corrupt staff member, whatever it is, obviously when we go through the process to figure out what's happening, you know, those that could have witnessed it 100%, we're looking at them, we're talking to them, usually the peers that are next to them, but we do go after their supervisors. You know, because again, they're in a position where that's their job. Their job is to make sure we're in line. And I get some things that we can't always see. I get it, but we are going to exhaust that avenue. You know, we are going to hold the supervisors accountable for certain things that they have the ability to check and hopefully reinforce, especially when it comes to, let's say, negligence of duty and falsification of logbooks, stuff like that. Undue familiarity with an inmate. Like if I was a supervisor and I see this person in the unit that shouldn't be in the unit, what did I do when that occurred? You know, did I address the person? Did I write him in any way? So there's actions that guys you always have to be careful of, because if something later on hits the fan and you're in a supervisor and you have responsibility of that area, they could always go back and say, hey, what happened when this person was doing this, this, and this? You know, oh, I talked to him. That may not have been good enough. You know what I mean? Sometimes you have to step up and do something, document them, especially if it doesn't make sense. Like, why are you in this unit? It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, the reason why I'm saying that is because same thing happens, just at a higher level with, let's say, an administrator. Administrator does something, let's say, foolish. You're checking all the people around them, probably the people they definitely have influence over, 100%, and hopefully they do talk and they do say the right thing once they know the window has been opened and there's no retaliation if they do say the right thing. But then, yes, you also have to check the people above because they are responsible for that person's behavior. So one of the things that would be asked was, has anybody ever brought a concern to you like this matter? Because think about this. If I was, let's say Connie was my boss and I have problems with Connie, I'm going to go to her boss and report it. Because that would be me. No different if I was an officer and I have a problem with the sergeant. Where do I go? A lieutenant. So usually if people have a problem with somebody because they feel that they're doing something corrupt, and they may have a problem because you're my boss, you can always go around and go to the next level up. So sometimes it's very hard for me to believe that if you have something that at this high of a level, there had to have been someone that's seen it, because again, there's just too many people involved when it comes to corruption at the highest level, because the administrator has the power to get things done, but in order for them to get things done, they have to go through people to do it. So usually when that happens, there's a whole mess of people that are involved in whatever this is that has occurred. So like one of us, if we see something wrong, I find it hard to believe that there's not a person that's going to say, well, you know what? I got to do something that doesn't seem right. I'm going to go ahead and bring it up to the next level of command. Now, with that said, if you do have it where the next level of command really doesn't have an idea of what happened and they're really not in the know, you do have a culture problem. 100%, in my mind, you do have a culture problem, because at this point here, you're telling me with someone that has all this influence, if I'm an administrator and I constantly find myself hanging out with this inmate all day, someone's going to say something. 100%. Someone's going to say something. But for that not to travel up, even anonymously, then for a fact that there's something going on that's not correct with the culture in that facility. So for me, if I'm looking down at all this, and I go to that immediate level that's above that administrator, and for them not to know something, for me, wake up call, culture problem. What's your thoughts on all that? Kind of, it's a lot there, but what's your thoughts?
No, I don't think honestly that needs any explanation. I honestly believe that there are telltale signs when there are things going awry in a facility, whether we want to acknowledge them or not. I think, yes, there may be some hesitation for folks to come forward and say, hey, listen, I have a concern. But you're right. If someone is in a place where they wouldn't normally be and you see them more often than not, you weren't the only one that saw them. Other people saw them too, right? Who are also thinking like, oh, what is he doing over here? Right? Like, what is he doing in that unit? Like those. And I get it. Sometimes just the busyness of the day, like you don't take the time to stop and like really consider it. But like, I feel like when there is
habitual behavior, like, that's just, it seems to be a routine now for the person. And one last thing, make sure people know, if the higher up doesn't know, that it could be a culture problem, or it could be they're involved too, somehow without knowing, or knowing. But yeah, can I start with that one?
No, I think that's the thing, right? Like you could be in that space where you're just busy and you haven't taken note, or you haven't decided to take an action, or are people intentionally turning a blind eye, right? Which also speaks to a culture, right? That we know something's going on, but everybody's doing it, right? And nobody wants to work in a culture like that, because how many people are going to be like, no, everybody's not doing it. I'm not doing it. Right. So why wouldn't you say something when you saw it was out of place? Right. Because that's the culture here. And so you don't think you should say anything, or that you have to say anything, because everybody knows that it's happening.
But you know what? Actually, speaking of that, what's funny? There was an article that came out on Corrections 1 that dealt with how to be each other's keeper, which is sort of what Connie just touched on. And it said most of the time, when people don't report things that are unethical, it's usually because of peer pressure, fear, prejudice or bias, apathy, not recognizing that they are empowered to act, lack of training or understanding, or what we just said, the agency culture. And then it goes, talks about just in general, it goes over a scenario about the Derek Chauvin case. But you know what? Obviously, without us reading this prior, or at least Connie didn't read it, we had the agency culture, and we actually talked about lack of training and understanding, especially if you're new and you don't know, right? We mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
The peer pressure, I believe so. We talked about retaliation. Maybe I'm not going to report it because I'm afraid to be retaliated against. I think that kind of also deals with fear. I'm going to kind of put those two together. The prejudice or bias, I think that comes into play. Again, not so much.
Prejudice in what sense?
Well, the funny thing is, what I get from this is that, remember, this is dealing with more of a frontline issue, but I'm thinking of more just being biased or prejudiced towards that type of behavior.
Oh,
I don't know if that's correct, but I'm assuming that's what it is. Apathy, I get it. It's just routine.
Yeah, it is what it is. Who cares?
Right. And that's kind of what Connie just touched on real quick, because she touched on, okay, they're going in the unit. Okay, it's habitual. Now it becomes routine. But the problem is you have to kind of know, okay, first time around, they're in this unit or whatever they are. We're kind of really generalizing it here. But let's just say, they're visiting an inmate they shouldn't be involved with. Because usually, sometimes that could be the case. At first it may be out of the ordinary, but nothing crazy. But it's out of the ordinary. So you kind of keep it in the back of your mind. But when they keep on doing it, the funny thing is that's when it should, oh, well, we got a problem here. But some people may look at it and say, well, they come here every day. Well, that's the problem.
Right.
Yeah, so when their mind should heighten because of it, but now it's become routine.
Yep.
So now it's a bit of a like, okay, well, we do have a problem here, but now it's been an accepted problem.
Right. We do. They do this all the time.
Right.
Right?
And Connie, I love this one. And maybe we can kind of close on this because this was a good part here. The not recognizing that they are empowered to act. What's your thoughts on that one? Because I mean, I think that matters when we're looking at it from let's say a supervisor doing something foolish. What is our role when it comes to a supervisor doing something they shouldn't be doing?
So I think in the context of universal precautions, right? We talk about that all the time. Being our brother's keeper is something universal, and I don't think it matters at what layer they're at in the hierarchy, right? Where they are in the chain of command. You see somebody doing something foolish, no matter what, we always have an obligation to safety and security at all levels. And I think it's safe enough to assume that even at that level, right, that person is compromised, which will lead to safety and security concerns down the line if there aren't already concerns. And, I just feel like there's the empowered part. So I think people should know they're empowered, but I think it's the managing the fear, right? The fear of the retaliation or the fear of what happens if I come forward, if I say something. And I think when we can move beyond what's going to happen to me personally and think about the broader what's happening in the facility, because I think I saw an article Steve Maynard had written just the other day about searches. I saw it on Guardian. And I think the sentence that caught my attention was a 5-minute search versus a lifetime, right? Like, you don't want to take the 5 minutes to do the search, but that the decision to not search could be a lifetime outcome, right? Mm-hmm. Someone can get hurt. Someone can lose a life if there are these contraband items that aren't identified or found during the search. And I kind of feel the same way in these instances where you have someone who might be above you in the chain of command. If you don't say anything, just understanding that the outcome to you not saying anything could be very grave.
You know what's funny? I'm actually going to use that in my daily reader, but I took it as a little something different, but I get your perspective. Mm-hmm. I took it as this, but you're right. I get what you're saying with the lifetime. I actually took it as don't cut corners. What I mean by that is maybe today I'll spend 5 minutes doing the search because I'm overwhelmed, and then maybe the next day, well, I cut corners once. Maybe I'll do it again until that becomes the routine.
Right. Or until I decide I'm not going to take the 5 minutes and I won't do a search at all.
Yeah. You're right. Because don't forget, at that point, the 5 minutes becomes the standard as opposed to what really is effective. And guys, obviously we all know searches take your time, but you're right. For me, I took it as once you start cutting corners, even though you're going to say you're only going to do it once, you always have to hold yourself every day to that 110%. And absolutely. I think that also falls into what we talked about here, where when you have someone, no matter what their rank is, if they cross the line, especially from the correctional officer side, if it affects your area, you have a duty. I have seen correctional officers get in trouble for not putting people in their logbook. I'm like, well, that was my supervisor. It doesn't matter. You're responsible for the housing unit. So having said that, you failed to put this person in the book, and we may not have enough on this person now, but we know that the person was here, and here, and you didn't put them in the logbook. That to me, obviously that matters. But I think the empowerment part also comes with lack of knowing what you can and can't do. So again, could go back to training. But there was something else you said that I thought was pretty spot on too, where in order for you to do the right thing, and I agree with this 100%, because this can even come at the end result of a process of manipulation where the inmate catches the leverage, and what they do is they say, well, if you don't do this, I'm going to go ahead and turn you in. So in order for the person to do the right thing, they have to remove themselves from it. In order to say, well, I got to do the right thing. This isn't about me covering my own ass anymore. This is more about how this is going to affect others. So the
Yep.
right thing would be to report it. But again, they have to kind of remove themselves out of, what they feel could directly affect them, the fear of being turned in. At one point, it's like, you know what? I gotta deal with it because now it's affecting others, and whatever the consequences are, the consequences are. I think that's
Yeah, it becomes bigger than you.
yeah, I think what you said was great, because I think the key to that part is that when you're dealing with a supervisor, and let's say you are afraid because you're afraid of the retaliation or whatever it is, you do have to kind of take the chance.
Yep.
Because at the end of the day, if you don't, later on when they find out you knew, that's not going to be a good enough excuse, because the point is you have a duty to report, a duty to act, a duty to stop. And that
Yep.
comes with the consequences of what that action could be. But don't forget, it won't be permanent, because once you do it, if they go to retaliate, then you got to keep on pushing it until they rectify the matter. But I love what you said, kind of elevating it up, and saying, you know what, this isn't about me. Let me go ahead and commit to the action, and then just make sure if I'm doing the right thing, I'm going to be persistent with it. And to be honest with you, I know me, and I know Connie too. If I'm doing the right thing, I don't give a shit about retaliation, because I'm going to fight and fight and fight, and eventually someone's going to hear me, because I won't give up. I mean, that's what you have to know, and you have to do that. You have to commit yourself to that. Connie, anything you'd like to say in closing?
I would just like to say, I know we always say safety and security is everybody's responsibility, but I think when we're seeing these instances of higher level leadership being walked out or leaving the job, and with under some suspicious circumstances, I think it matters that as those who are left behind in facilities, that we've done the right thing, right? Like, someone could very well have reported someone, right? And made sure that the information they had got to the right place. Like, I feel like there's always a way to make that happen. There's always a way to get critical information up the chain of command to the right people to do what needs to be done, right? And I think the other thing we have to realize too is that even in making the move to get that information out there, like, you can live with yourself, right? Because you did the right thing, right? You didn't stand by and allow for something that could have been avoided, or that could have put you and your brothers and sisters behind the wall at risk. And the fact that you've taken the step to do that, is something that, even if you're not going to get the outside acknowledgement and applaud, like, you have to be okay in yourself knowing I did the right thing today. Today's a good day, So listen, whoever's out there who may be in a situation, who may know something is going on, I mean, aside from, you need to speak up and save yourself, right? It's understanding that speaking up can save everybody else. It's not just you.
Yeah, I like that. And that actually motivates you to do the right thing. Because again, the fear of the consequence, and you're right, this isn't just about me. This is about everything, technically, because again, especially someone at the highest levels. And guys, this even happens if it's just your peers too, the peer pressure, the culture. I mean, the feeling that, man, if I do something, I'm now an outcast. And especially in corrections, you need your brothers and sisters to have your back. But I guarantee you, more will be supportive of the right thing than they will be of the wrong thing. And to me, that alleviates a lot, because in the end, no one could say that you knew about it and didn't do anything about it. To me, that's always been the concern. Once you see something, you can't unsee it. And someone's going to be able to prove it eventually that you saw something and didn't do anything about it. And now, the funny thing is, here's another thing too. You just lost all credibility.
Oh, yeah.
Trust and believe. In these positions and corrections, it's all about credibility and trust. And if it's gone once, it's almost impossible to get it back. And I'm not talking about trust when it comes to, being capable to do your job, because we can get better and better and better, and then people just trust us with more and more things to do. I'm talking about trust when it comes to violating integrity. That's a different type of trust. That's the trust that once you do it once, you don't get that trust back. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.